The planet Gorna-3 was a dusty place, full of broken machines and empty streets. Long ago, it had been a trading post between humans and aliens, but now, it was mostly forgotten. Only a few traders, scavengers, and slavers came here now, and, among the ruins, something small moved through the trash. A little alien girl, thin as a stick, crawled on her hands and knees. Her skin was pale blue, and her body was covered in dirt. Her clothes were torn, barely hanging on her small frame. She had no shoes, and her tail dragged behind her like it was too tired to lift. Her name. She didn't have one. No one ever gave her one. They called her Dog Girl, because that's how she acted, eating scraps, growling to protect food, barking to scare others away. She had learned long ago that kindness didn't exist on Gorna-3. If she wanted to live, she had to act like an animal, and even then, survival was hard. Each day she searched the trash piles near the spaceport, hoping to find something not too rotten, a half-eaten fruit, some cold noodles, maybe a bone with a bit of meat, anything that would stop the pain in her belly. Today, she found a crushed food pack near an old cargo crate. She ripped it open with her teeth and licked the jelly inside. It tasted awful, but she ate it anyway. Around her, other orphaned alien kids watched with jealous eyes. Some were older, stronger, but none wanted to fight the Dog Girl. She bit hard, and she didn't care who screamed. She had scars on her arms from fights, and a chunk of her tail was missing from one bad night, but she was still alive. That meant she was winning. Above her, ships landed and took off, engines rumbling like thunder. Most people didn't look down. They never saw her, never cared. To them, she was nothing, just a dirty thing crawling in the dirt. But one man did stop. Jace was a human cargo pilot, flying alone through the outer rim. His ship was old but fast, and he'd come to Gorna-3 to trade scrap parts. He stepped off his ramp and looked around. The place stank of rust, oil, and sorrow. Then, his eyes landed on the small figure near the crates. She was licking a food packet like a wild animal. Her knees were cut, her ribs showing. And her eyes, those big silver eyes, watched everything with fear. She noticed him and froze, ready to run. But Jace didn't shout or throw a rock like others. He slowly reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed food bar, still fresh. He crouched down and held it out, gently. "Hey there," he said, his voice soft. "You hungry?" The girl didn't move. She crouched low like a cornered animal, eyes wide. Was it a trick? Was he going to hit her? She didn't understand his words, but the smell of the food called to her. Her stomach growled loudly, and her hands trembled. Jace placed the food bar on the ground and stepped back. He didn't want to scare her. He just watched. Slowly, carefully, the girl crawled forward. She sniffed the bar like a scared pup, then grabbed it and jumped back. She tore the wrapper open with her teeth and stuffed it into her mouth. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. Not from pain, but from the shock of real food, real kindness. Jace's heart hurt just watching her. "What have they done to you?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. She looked up at him, confused, food crumbs on her lips. No one had ever looked at her like that, like she mattered. Behind him, two traders laughed, pointing at the scene. "That one. She eats like a dog, always has." One said, "Filthy mutt." The other chuckled. But Jace didn't laugh. He turned to them and frowned. "That's a child, not a joke." They shrugged and walked away. Nobody cared, but Jace did. He turned back to the girl, still sitting in the dirt, holding the empty wrapper like it was treasure. He knelt down again, this time closer. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She stared at him, unsure. Then she lowered her head. No words came, just a low whimper. She didn't have a name. No one ever gave her one. Jace took off his jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. "All right then," he said with a sad smile. "Let's give you one." He looked at her silver eyes and the little flicker of fire still inside. "How about Luma?" he said softly. "You look like a star, trying to shine." The girl blinked, then nodded once. Luma, that was her name now. and for the first time in her broken life, she didn't feel like a dog anymore. Luma sat on the floor of Jace's ship, her knees pulled up to her chest. The jacket he gave her was too big, but it was warm. The ship's lights were soft, not harsh like the suns of Gornithri. The engines hummed gently, like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, the girl didn't hear shouting, didn't feel fists, didn't smell rot. She just sat, quiet and confused. Jace moved slowly around the ship, fixing panels and sorting tools. He didn't talk too much, just let her sit and rest. Every few hours, he offered her food, water, and a soft smile. He didn't touch her without warning, and he didn't force her to speak, but he always used the same word when he looked at her, Luma, and slowly, she started to accept it. One day, he found her sitting near the engine room, curled up like a cat. He sat on the floor next to her and showed her a piece of fruit. It was sweet and colorful, nothing like the dry junk she was used to. She reached for it, then stopped. Her hand shook. "You can have it," he said softly. "It's for you." She took it with both hands, eyes wide. She didn't eat it like before. This time, she chewed slowly, like she was trying to understand the taste. When she finished, she looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time, she whispered a sound. "Lou, Ma." Jace's eyes lit up. "Yes," he smiled. "That's you." Her voice was rough, unused, but that one word held power. She wasn't dog girl anymore. She was Luma, and someone had finally said it with love. Over the next few days, Jace gave her soft clothes to wear, clean, warm, not rags. He even gave her a comb, though she didn't know what it was at first. He gently showed her how to use it, brushing her tangled white hair until it shined again. She sat still, watching him through the mirror, not barking, not growling, just watching, learning, and remembering what it felt like to be safe. Sometimes, she'd wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Jace would rush to her, kneel beside her, and whisper calm words. She'd cry quietly, not because of pain, but because someone cared. He never yelled, never left her alone. In the dark, he just stayed until she stopped shaking. One morning, Luma walked to the kitchen area on her own. She pointed at the food storage and tilted her head, asking without words. Jace laughed gently and helped her pick a meal. "You don't need to bark to ask for food," he said. "You can use your hands." "Your voice?" She looked down, ashamed. Her life had trained her to growl and steal. Nothing else had ever worked. But Jace was teaching her something new, something better. Later that day, he sat at the table with a small device, a language pad. He pointed at pictures and said words, repeating them slowly. Water, food, ship, safe. Luma tried to copy him, her voice quiet and uncertain. But Jace always nodded, always encouraged her. When she got it wrong, he didn't laugh. He just tried again, patiently. Day by day, she learned. More words, more signs, more hope. She pointed at herself and said Luma, with pride. She pointed at Jace and waited. He smiled. Jace. She repeated it, smiling shyly. Jesh, he laughed. Close enough. That night, Luma curled up in the ship's sleeping pod, wrapped in a blanket. Jace dimmed the lights and stood in the doorway. Before leaving, he heard a soft whisper. "Thank you, Jesh." He turned, surprised. Luma was looking at him, her silver eyes glowing in the dark. He nodded slowly, emotion rising in his chest. "You're welcome, Luma." But peace never lasted long in space. Far away, on the dirty streets of Gornithri, someone was asking questions. The slavers had noticed the missing dog girl. They didn't call her Lumith. They didn't know her name. To them, she was just property. A wild thing that brought laughs and bets. But now she was gone, and someone had seen her leave with a human pilot. They had her scent, her image, and they were coming to take her back. Jace didn't know it yet, but saving Luma had made him a target, and Luma sweet, shy, soft-spoken Luma was far more important than anyone guessed. She was not just a survivor, not just a girl. She was something much more, and the galaxy was about to find out. The stars outside the ship sparkled like diamonds scattered across black silk. Inside, everything was calm. Luma sat on the co-pilot chair, legs crossed, wearing clean clothes. Her silver eyes stared out the window, amazed by the colors of space. She had never seen the stars before. Not really. Not as something beautiful. Only as cold things above her while she dug through trash. But now, they looked like home. Jace leaned back in the pilot's seat, sipping a cup of rehydrated coffee. He watched her quietly, noticing how much she had changed in just a few days. No more barking, no more flinching at every sound. Now she asked questions, pointed at things, and smiled softly when he called her Luma. She was learning fast, faster than most kids he'd met. There was something special about her, but he couldn't quite say what. Suddenly, the radar screen beeped. Jace leaned forward, checking the display. A small transport ship had entered the area. No ID tag, no signal, just floating close. He narrowed his eyes. Could be nothing, could be trouble. He gently patted Luma's shoulder. Go rest in the back, kid, just in case, he said, trying to sound casual. Luma looked at him with a bit of worry, but nodded and walked off. As soon as she left, Jace activated the outer cams. The other ship was drifting closer to close. Then came the knock, loud and heavy. On the outer airlock door, 3 short bangs, a pause, then one long knock, a pattern, a warning. Jace grabbed his sidearm and walked to the entry hatch. He opened the outer cam mic and spoke into it. State your business, he said. A deeper voice replied, we're looking for something that belongs to us. Jace's jaw tightened. And what's that? The voice laughed. A pet that ran off. Skinny little thing, sharp teeth, no name, acts like a dog. Jace's eyes narrowed. He didn't answer. The voice continued. Some say a human picked it up, fed it, even gave it a name. Behind him, Luma peeked from the hallway, eyes wide with fear. She had heard the voice. Her hands were shaking again, her body stiff like stone. But she didn't run this time. She just whispered, Slavers. Jace nodded slowly. She's not your property, he said into the mic. Voice steady. She's not yours either. The voice snapped. She's no one. Just trash from Gorna 3. Jace clenched his fists. No, he said. She's Luma. There was silence for a moment. Then came a reply colder than space itself. Then you'll both die for her. The ship rocked. A warning shot hit the shield. Jace jumped into the cockpit, shouting, strap in. Luma ran and buckled herself, shaking, but listening to every command. Jace activated the engines and pulled the ship into a hard spin, dodging the next blast. They weren't built for battle, but they had speed. The enemy ship chased them, firing. Again and again, lights flickered, alarms rang, and Luma clutched the seat tight. I'm sorry, she whispered. They want me, not you. Jace glanced at her, his voice sharp. I'm not leaving you. Tears fell from her eyes, but she nodded. No one had ever said that before. Everyone always left. Jace sent the ship into a steep dive toward the atmosphere of a nearby moon. Thick clouds covered them, giving them a chance to hide. He powered down everything, lights, engines, even heat signals. The ship became a ghost in the sky, silent and unseen. They sat in the dark, breathing hard. Outside, nothing moved. No shots, no sounds. Just clouds and silence. Then finally, the radar cleared. The slaver ship was gone. Jace slumped in his chair, exhausted. That was close, he muttered. Luma didn't say anything. She walked over to him, quietly, and sat beside him. Then, slowly, she took his hand in hers. It was small, cold, but brave. You protected me, she said softly. You didn't have to. Jace squeezed her hand gently. Yes, I did, he replied. Because you're not property, Luma. You're a person, and you matter. She stared at him, trying to believe those words, trying to accept them. Then she whispered something he never expected to hear. I think I used to be something, before I was nothing. Jace looked at her closely. What do you mean? Luma shook her head, confused. I don't know. I just remember light, and people bowing, and fire. Then it all went black. Jace frowned. He knew then this girl's story was far from over, and he had just stepped into something bigger than he could imagine. Not just a rescue, not just kindness. He had taken in a child with a hidden past, and now? The galaxy wanted her back. The sky above the moon was thick with clouds, dark and silent. Jace's ship hovered quietly, hidden under a rocky overhang near a dried-up riverbed. Luma sat in the co-pilot seat, staring at the static on the screen. She looked calmer, but inside, her heart beat like thunder. They had escaped, but not far. The slavers might return, and Jace knew they had to move soon. He stood near the control panel, his eyes scanning data feeds. The ship had taken damage minor, but enough to slow them down. Will they come back? Luma asked softly. Her voice trembled, but she didn't hide. She wanted to know. Even if the answer hurt, Jace didn't lie. Maybe, he said, but we won't be here when they do. He crouched next to her, pulling out a small metal cube. It unfolded into a 3D map of the nearby system. There's a station 2 jumps away, he said, pointing old mining post, mostly abandoned now. No slavers, no patrols, no noise. Luma studied the map, her silver eyes glowing faintly. She touched the dot where they were, then moved her finger to the mining post. Her hand stopped shaking. Let's go there, she whispered. Jace smiled, proud of her courage. All right, but we need to stay low and fast. The warp core needs a quick reset first. As he moved to the engine bay, Luma followed him. She watched carefully as he opened panels and adjusted wires. He explained every step, like he was teaching her. And she listened, like every word was a gift. You learn quick, he said. Wiping sweat from his brow, Luma gave a tiny smile. You talk better than most. Jace chuckled. That's because I don't lie. Suddenly, the ship lights flickered. A warning alert popped up, red and loud. Incoming signal detected in known vessel approaching fast. Jace's eyes went wide. No time left, he muttered, slamming the panels shut. Get strapped in, now. Luma ran back to the seat and buckled in tight. Jace jumped into the pilot's chair and slammed the thrusters. The ship roared to life and shot forward through the clouds. Outside, a sleek black vessel appeared, faster, newer, and armed. Slavers. Again, a sharp voice echoed over the com. Return the girl, and we'll let you live. Jace didn't reply. He hit the warp drive, but the core was still recharging. 15 seconds to jump too long under fire. The enemy ship fired a warning shot that grazed their hull. Sparks flew inside, and Luma screamed. Jace gritted his teeth and swerved hard. Dodging a second blast, he whispered, just hold together, girl. Not to Luma but to the ship. 10 seconds. Left, hang on, Jace shouted, flipping a hidden switch. The ship dropped low, spinning between canyon walls. The slaver ship followed, but slower, too big to match their moves. Luma watched the screen, her hands tight on the seat. She didn't cry this time. She didn't curl up. She watched, learned, and trusted. 5 seconds. One last blast hit their rear engine. The ship shook hard. Lights flickered again, but they were still flying. Still moving forward. 3, 2, 1, go. Jace shouted. The warp drive kicked in. The stars stretched into long lines as the ship jumped into hyperspace. The slaver ship disappeared behind them like a bad dream. They were safe, for now. The ship exited warp near the mining station. It floated, like a ghost above a dusty planet. No lights, no signals, just old metal and silence. Jace slowly landed the ship in a docking bay, covered in rust and vines. He powered everything down, just in case. They sat quietly for a moment, catching their breath. Luma turned to him, her voice soft but firm. You didn't leave me. Jace looked at her, surprised. Of course not. She nodded. Others did, always. But you. You flew through fire, Jace reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "You're not something to be left behind," he said. "You're not a thing. You're not property." Your Luma. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she smiled through them, and then she reached into the pocket of her jacket and pulled something out. A broken pendant, shaped like a star. She looked at it, confused. "I had this before the cages," she said. "I don't remember how." Jace took it gently and looked closer. It wasn't just jewelry, it had a royal crest on the back. He frowned. Something clicked in his mind. This girl wasn't just running from slavers. She might be running from something far, far bigger, but he didn't say anything yet. He just handed it back and said, "Keep it safe." Princess Luma blinked. "Princess?" she asked, confused. Jace grinned. "Why not?" The mining station was quiet, covered in dust, rust, and silence. Its halls echoed like an old cave, forgotten by time. Jace led the way with a flashlight, and Luma followed closely, her star-shaped pendant tight in her hand. She had been here for only a few minutes, but something about the place felt strange familiar, like a memory she couldn't quite grab. They moved carefully through the halls, stepping over broken tools and empty crates. Old signs in alien languages flickered weakly on the walls. "No power, no cameras, no noise," Jace said softly. "Perfect place to hide." Luma nodded, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She didn't look like the girl who once ate scraps in the dirt. She stood straighter now, her steps lighter, more sure, but inside her chest, her heart was still full of questions. Who was she really? Why did the slavers want her back so badly? And why did Jace call her princess, with that strange look in his eyes? They found a small control room with working systems. Jace plugged in his tablet and started scanning records. Meanwhile, Luma sat on an old seat. Turning the pendant over and over, she touched the symbol on the back. It looked like a flame, curled into a crown. She had no memory of it, but it made her chest feel warm and cold at the same time. Jace pulled up a dusty archive file. It blinked once, then opened. He scrolled through images, articles, names until one picture froze. Him in place. It was a photo, years old, grainy but clear. A woman with silver eyes and long white hair stood on a balcony, holding a child in her arms. The woman wore robes lined with gold, and soldiers bowed at her feet. Next to the picture, a headline read, "Princess Aluna and her daughter visit outer colonies before attack." Jace turned the screen slowly toward Luma. "Look," he said gently. Luma leaned forward, her breath caught in her throat. The woman, her eyes, her hair, even the soft shape of her mouth, she looked just like Luma, only older, and in her arms was a baby, wearing a tiny crown. Luma dropped the pendant and stared at the screen. That's me," she whispered. "That baby? It's me." Jace nodded. "I think you're the last of the royal bloodline," he said. "Your mother must have hidden you during the raid, and somehow you ended up in the slavers' hands." Luma stood up, her legs shaking. She walked to the dusty window and stared out at the stars. All her life, she thought she was trash, a mistake, a wild thing. Now she learned she was born in a palace, held by a queen, maybe even loved. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "I don't remember her," she said, voice small. "I don't remember anything before the cage." Jace stood beside her. "That doesn't mean it wasn't real," he said. "You were taken, hurt, and forgotten, but now, you know who you are." Luma turned to him slowly. "What do I do now?" she asked. "I'm not ready to be anything." "You don't have to be ready," he said. "You just have to survive until you can choose. Right now, you're still in danger, because someone out there wants you gone." Suddenly, the comms panel lit up. A signal was broadcasting nearby. Jace rushed to check it. It wasn't a slaver signal, but it was encrypted, high-level military style. Someone powerful was scanning for energy traces, and they were close. "Time to move again," Jace muttered, but before he could shut it down, the message came through. "To the one who carries the star pendant, if she lives, The crown still waits. Luma's mouth fell open. She walked closer to the screen, her pendant still in her hand. She pressed it against the panel and it glowed. Jace stared, shocked. It wasn't just a memory trinket. It was a key. The screen shifted, unlocking a hidden channel. A face appeared, older, tired, but proud, an alien elder wearing royal armor. If you are hearing this, then the heir has survived. The elder said, your bloodline was not broken. We have hidden allies, ready to protect her. Then the message vanished, and the panel went dark. Jace and Luma stood frozen, the air thick with silence. She looked up at him. I'm not just some lost kid, she said slowly. I'm the crown. Jace nodded. And that means they'll come harder now because they're afraid of what you could become. Luma clenched her fists. She wasn't shaking this time. She wasn't crying. For the first time, she didn't feel like running. She felt like fighting. Luma sat on the edge of the old metal bed, holding the glowing pendant close to her chest. Her fingers were wrapped around it tightly, like it could protect her from what was coming. The message had changed everything. She wasn't just a survivor now. She was a symbol, a living heir to a forgotten crown. Jace stood by the control console, his face tense. He had scanned the nearby systems again, and the results weren't good. There are at least 3 ships nearby, he said. One of them just dropped out of warp at the edge of this sector. They're not pirates, he added. They're cleaner, faster, more professional. Luma didn't answer at first. She stared at the floor, then looked up. So they know I'm alive, she whispered. They know the bloodline didn't die. Jace nodded slowly. And they're not coming to celebrate. They're coming to erase the last piece of the past. Luma's jaw tightened. All my life they called me trash, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. But I was born a princess. Now they want to bury that truth forever. Jace turned and knelt in front of her. I won't let them take you, he said. Not while I'm breathing. Luma looked into his eyes. For the first time, she saw fear. They're not fear for himself, but for her, and strangely, it made her feel stronger, not weaker. She nodded. Then let's prepare, together. They locked down the mining station's lower levels. Jace set up old security drones he'd reprogrammed for defense. They didn't have much, just one working turret, a few energy shields, and some explosives, but it was enough to stall an enemy, enough to protect a life. Luma followed every instruction, learning quickly. She wasn't scared of tools or wires. She worked with focus, even as her hands shook a little. At one point, she turned to Jace and said, they always told me I was weak, that I was nothing. Why do I feel stronger now? Jace smiled as he handed her a power cell. Because now you know the truth. You're not alone anymore. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The radar beeped. One of the ships had landed. Jace ran to the screen. 3 life forms approaching. Fast, armed, moving through the outer tunnels. They're here, he said. Suit up. He tossed Luma a small blaster, just in case. She hesitated, then gripped it with both hands. I'll fight if I have to, she said, but I won't. Run. Jace's heart swelled with pride and fear at the same time. He opened the hatch, and they slipped into the shadows of the mining station. Old steam pipes hissed in the distance, and boots echoed in the halls. The enemy moved like wolves, silent, sure, deadly. Then came a voice, smooth and cold. Return the girl, and we'll leave the human alive. Jace stepped out, rifle raised. No deal, he said flatly. 3 armored figures stepped into the light. One wore a Crest Royal Enforcer class. You don't understand, the leader said. She is a danger to the galaxy. She's a child, Jace growled. You're the danger, behind them. Luma stepped forward, her pendant glowing. Again, the enforcers froze. One of them even lowered his weapon slightly. She carries the mark, he whispered. The flame crown still burns. The leader barked. She dies here. Blasters fired. The hallway lit up with red and blue. Light. Jace dropped behind cover, returning fire with sharp precision. The drones activated. zipping down the corridor, spraying suppressive shots. The sound was deafening, but Luma stood her ground. One of the enforcers rushed forward straight toward her. She didn't scream. She lifted the pendant high. It flashed with a burst of white energy that knocked the enforcer back like a wave. He hit the wall and didn't get up. Jace turned in shock. "Luma," he shouted. "What was that?" She stared at her own hand, still glowing slightly. "I don't know," she whispered. It responded to me. It protected me." The final two attackers fell back, retreating toward the entrance. Jace chased them halfway, then stopped, his rifle shaking in his hands. "They'll report this," he said. "They'll send more." Luma walked beside him, her voice calm now. "Then we don't wait. We go to them before they can strike again." He looked at her, surprised. She wasn't the same girl he'd found in the dirt. She wasn't crawling anymore. She was standing tall, her back straight, her eyes steady. She was becoming what she was born to be. "What are you saying?" Jace asked, breathless. "I'm saying it's time I stop hiding," she said. "I was once hunted, but now let them fear me." Luma stood at the edge of the platform, her silver eyes watching the stars above. Behind her, Jace worked on the ship, making final adjustments for the jump. The mining station had gone silent again, but the echoes of the last battle still rang. In their minds, Luma held the glowing pendant tightly in her hand. She could still feel the energy from it pulsing softly in her fingers. Jace walked up beside her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "It's ready," he said. "Once we're in the next system, we can disappear again if you want." Luma didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the sky. She had run her whole life, from cages, from slavers, from the truth. But now, the galaxy was watching again. And this time, she wasn't going to run. "I don't want to hide," she said finally. "Not anymore." Jace tilted his head, curious. "What do you want then?" Luma turned and looked at him. Her face was calm, but her voice carried weight. "I want to go to them," she said, "to the ones who still remember my family. I want to claim my place, not because I want a crown, but because I want this too. Stop for others like me." Jace's eyes widened. "Luma, if you do that, you'll paint a target on your back even bigger than before." "I know," she replied, "but it's not just about me anymore. They'll keep hurting kids like me until someone makes them stop." There was silence for a moment. Jace sighed and gave her a small, proud smile. "You sound like a leader already." Luma smiled back. "That's because I learned from one." Jace laughed softly, shaking his head. "I was just trying to keep you alive, and you did." She said, "You gave me food, a name, and a reason to believe I wasn't just trash." She stepped forward, lifting the pendant again. "Now, I'll give them a reason to believe in something better." Hours later, their ship came out of warp, above a glowing world, Earthen Prime. Once the heart of the old Royal Alliance, now it was divided, corrupted by power struggles and fear. But in the capital below, there were still people who remembered the old ways. And when Luma's ship landed in the center plaza, guarded only by Jace and a few repurposed drones, crowds began to gather. They didn't recognize her at first, just a small alien girl stepping off an old freighter. But then she lifted the pendant, and the flame crown symbol burned bright in the air above her. Gasps filled the streets. Old soldiers fell to one knee, and one voice shouted from the crowd, "The heir returns." Luma stood on the stone steps of the council hall, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Luma, daughter of Aluna, rightful child of the Thauran bloodline. You let the slavers take me, let the galaxy forget me, but I lived. I crawled through the dirt, was caged like an animal, but I lived, and a human." She paused and pointed to Jace behind her. "A stranger from another world gave me back my name. While you bowed to those in power, he bowed to kindness." The crowd stood in stunned silence. Then slowly, one by one, heads began to lower. Not out of fear but respect. She wasn't wearing royal robes. She didn't need them, because the fire in her words was brighter than any crown. and the strength in her eyes was stronger than any throne. Jace stood back and watched. His arms crossed. He didn't say a word, but in his heart, he knew he'd just witnessed something rare, something powerful. She wasn't a lost girl anymore. She was a leader, a spark, a light in the dark. She had chosen not revenge, but change. Not silence, but a voice. Not hiding, but rising. As the sun set over Erethan Prime, and the city lights glowed like stars below, Luma turned to Jace and held out her hand. "I want you beside me," she said, "not as a guard, not as a pilot, but as my family." Jace's eyes softened. "I never had a family," he said quietly. "Now you do," Luma replied. "You saved a princess who was once called a dog, and made her believe in herself again. Let me give that back to you. For the rest of our days." Jace took her hand. No more words were needed, and so, the girl who once ate scraps in the dirt stood before a galaxy that had forgotten her. Not as a victim, not as a prisoner, but as a princess who chose to rise. With a human who saw her worth before anyone else did. Together, they were not just a pair of survivors. They were the start of something greater.